Alright, so today I want to discuss one of the strategies that I use as a ball python breeder when I'm buying into certain projects, and that is I buy for the genes in the snake versus buying for the physical appearance of the snake. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of times I'll do a lot of morph specials where I'll go through, like for example, I'll do the champagne morph and I'll go through all the pros and cons of mixing different genes with the champagne. And some of them look really impressive and some of them are not that impressive. As a matter of fact, when I buy into a project, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll buy a snake that is not necessarily that physically attractive. When you're buying into these projects, you really want to buy it for the genes that you're after. So for example, when I buy into a project now, I probably have, I don't know how many genes in my collection. I probably have like 20 or 25 different genes. So what I do is I look at all the different genes I have. I have pieds, clowns, desert ghosts, a bunch of stuff like that. When I'm buying into a new project, what I really want to do is I want to buy some genes that I don't have. One of the genes I don't have right now is champagne. So I would look at champagne plus maybe one or two other genes that I don't have in my collection. And keep in mind, even if that snake isn't physically attractive on the outside, I'm thinking about it as the potential of a ball python breeder, which is a little bit different than just buying like a pet quality snake. Just buying as a snake just as a pet instead of the intended purpose of breeding. And I would probably imagine that most people that are spending, $500, $600, $700 on a ball python probably have breeding in mind when they're shelling out that kind of money. Otherwise, they have a lot of disposable income. Or I'd say most people, when they're buying pet quality, they probably buy less expensive snakes, probably just for a couple $100. So what I want to do today is I'm going to jump over to the internet and I want to show you just two examples where I would buy a snake based on the genes instead of the physical appearance. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I just want to show you two quick examples of what I'm talking about. There seems to be a little bit of confusion. As a matter of fact, a lot of times I'll pull up a snake that has two genes that don't really look that impressive, and I'm not really saying don't buy that snake. What I'm really saying is if you want those two genes, you should invest in those genes, and it doesn't really matter what the snake looks like, but keep in mind if you're breeding that snake, you may not want to produce more of those because they're really not that impressive. So for example, this is just a straight champagne. This is essentially what it looks like. And I'll say champagne is one of the more difficult snakes to actually work with. There's not a whole lot of combos that actually work very well with champagne, although it's a pretty awesome gene. So essentially what you do is if you have a champagne, you breed it to something else. 50% of the offspring have champagne in them. And a lot of times when you mix champagne with different genes, essentially what you get is a lot of times you get a patternless snake that is a slightly different color. I'd say that is probably the main disadvantage of the champagne. Although if you know the good combos that you can actually produce with champagne, you can produce some snakes like nothing else you've ever seen. Pretty amazing combos. So I just kind of wanted to show you. So for example, if you wanted to invest in champagne, which is a gene that I don't have, you can actually buy something that also has cinnamon in it. So this is another gene I don't have in my collection. And when I buy into projects, I'm looking through all my genes. What genes do I want to add to my collection? Because keep in mind, if you keep breeding year after year, it's really a long-term project, and you start breeding champagne and cinnamon through all your other stuff. It's not just, a lot of people have kind of a short-term look when they're, they kind of think short-term when they're breeding. They're like, all right, I want to buy these two snakes and breed them together. But as you get more and more snakes, you have more and more of a color palette, kind of like an artist, and you have all these red, greens, and blues on your palette. Then you want to add a couple more colors that you can make awesome paint jobs with. So for example, if you wanted to add the cinnamon on top of the champagne, you could actually buy a snake that kind of looks like this. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. You mix the cinnamon with champagne and you get a slightly different color of a champagne. Not really that impressive by themselves, although the individual genes are extremely powerful when you start breeding with other snakes. And I guess you you could say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You know, a lot of people look at the snake and say that is a beautiful snake, which, you know, I wouldn't disagree. It's just not really, you know, when people think of, especially, I guess it's kind of a personal preference for me when I'm looking at a snake. What I want to see is some pattern and some contrast and some different colors I can add in to really make the snake really pop as far as the paint job. So for example, here is something you can actually make if you buy into a cinnamon champagne. So for example, I would probably buy the snake if I was going after this one right here. Take a look at this. This is called the gray matter. And the gray matter, essentially what it is, it looks like a pied with the big splotches of white through it, but it doesn't have any pied genes in it. And the dark splotches here that are typical of pieds are actually like a silver metallic color. Pretty awesome. And if you look at the genes that actually make up the snake, it is the super cinnamon and the champagne. And you take a look at this, these are actually selling, this one actually sold for $1,500, still bringing in some good money. It's an awesome combo, but you have to hit the super cinnamon. So essentially what you'd have to do is you take that cinnamon champagne and you breed it to a super cinnamon, or you could breed it to a cinnamon to produce some more gray matters. One thing you don't want to do is actually cross two gray matters together, because you'll end up, you know, 25% of the time getting the lethal combo of the super champagne. You want to stay away from breeding champagne to another champagne. So if you actually bought into that project, here's another thing you can actually make. You could make a super pewter. So, you know, you're kind of buying into the cinnamon and the champagne, and you can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. And this snake is pretty awesome. I think it's kind of cool. It's pretty awesome. Take a look at what's actually in this. And believe it or not, there's no champagne in this one, even though it looks kind of like a champagne. This is actually the super cinnamon to a super pastel. So what you can actually do is you could breed that champagne cinnamon over to something like a pastel or a super pastel, and you'd get the cinnamon pastels, and then you breed two of those together and you could get some super pewters. These are pretty awesome too. Selling for a really good price. This one actually sold for $750. Not a whole lot of these snakes out there. It's kind of a niche market when you get into like the gray matters and the super pewters and stuff like that. Here is another one you can do with champagne. So you remember, is if you buy champagne, there's a lot of things you can do with champagne, not just with the cinnamon, but separate from the champagne. So if you breed it to something else, you'll crank out pure champagnes as some of the offspring, and you can use those as, you know, breeders to breed to something else. You can actually breed a champagne to a pied, and you get what is actually looks like a pied, but it's a champagne het pied. Really amazing snakes. And the cool thing about the champagne het pied, all you need is one copy of the pied gene. It looks like a pied, and in most cases it looks like it's bringing in about the same money as a pied. They're selling for about $350, which is pretty cool. Actually, I've seen more and more of these popping up over on Morphmarket. I wanted to show you one more snake with the champagne, and I'd say champagne's really tough, and we're all kind of waiting to see what's going to pop out as far as combos that work really well with champagne. Take a look at this. This one just came up. It's the first time I've ever seen anything like this. This is actually the Leopard Champagne. This is really the first champagne where it has a lot of pattern, a lot of high contrast, and is one of the most impressive snakes that I've ever seen with champagne, and it's pretty awesome. And it's something that's just brand new on the market. It's kind of interesting because you can take a look at who actually produced this snake, and essentially what you're doing is you're buying into somebody else's project a lot of times when they're working with this. This is actually 100% het clown, so you know what they're doing here? They're actually trying to work this into a clown combo, and this looks like it has a lot of potential. As a matter of fact, this one is for sale, selling for $2,000, and that's kind of the interesting thing is as you progress projects along further and further, you can't hold back all the offspring, so you end up selling some, and then other people can spend the money and jump in and kind of get a leap forward as far as where they are in their breeding program. It's pretty awesome. So here's another snake it's kind of, I would say, if you actually take a look at this snake, I would say these genes don't really work well together. And if you look at all the genes in here, there is a lot of genes. There's actually 7 genes in this snake, and there's just so many. Sometimes if you mix so many genes in there, it kind of gets muddied out, and it's kind of what I'm talking about when I go through the different morphs and I say, you know, these genes don't really work together, but this snake would be a super powerful breeder because you could get a whole combination of a whole bunch of different combinations. As a matter of fact, if you took, you know, this is actually the black pastel, fire, orange dream, pastel, trick, leopard, and clown, which is pretty amazing. This is actually a recessive clown. If you actually bred this to a clown, I actually plugged it into the genetic calculator and just looked at the combos. Take a look at this. This is actually breeding that snake just to a clown, and you get 64 possible offspring, and it just kind of boggles the mind, all the different combinations that you can get with just that one snake breeding it to a clown. That's what I'm talking about, that you can actually get so many really awesome snakes. I just picked out 2 of them from this. Take a look at this one. This is one of the ones you could get breeding that one to a clown. This is the pastel leopard clown, pretty awesome combo. You can also get this one. This is pretty awesome too. This is actually the firefly orange dream clown. So you could actually breed that snake. Doesn't look really that impressive. You breed it to a clown and you pop out 64 different, like a whole rainbow of all these different clowns. Pretty awesome combo. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Thomas Hawley asks, when you're selling snakes, do you wait until the temperature is safe before you ship them out? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, this is my very first year shipping ball pythons through the mail. Basically, we ship them through FedEx, Overnight Express, and you really have to wait until the temperatures are within a specific range. And it's pretty much all laid out over on Ship Your Reptiles. You sign up for an account, and they give you all the rules and regulations. You need the right box, and if it's below 38 degrees for a daytime high on both ends, then you can't ship your snakes, and if it's above 70 on either end, then you're not supposed to use a heat pack. There's a lot of stuff. If it's really hot, you can actually use a cold pack. It gets pretty confusing, but yes, I'm actually waiting on quite a few snakes, waiting on the weather to warm up a little bit more. So I'm going to leave you with a little bit of drone footage. We had a snowstorm last night. It was really beautiful up here in the mountains. Pretty cold, but that fresh snow makes for really beautiful drone footage. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.